Damien lived in a city shrouded in perpetual darkness, a place where shadows seemed to have a life of their own. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the cobblestone streets echoed with the mournful cries of lost souls. He had been born into this world of despair, a world that had consumed his parents and left him alone at a tender age. His childhood was a blur of hardship and loneliness. He learned to fend for himself at a young age, his days filled with scavenging for food and seeking shelter from the biting cold. The city, with its towering spires and crumbling facades, became his prison, a place where hope seemed to have vanished long ago. When he was a child, as Damien was wandering through the city's labyrinthine alleys, he witnessed a scene that would forever change his life. His parents were being dragged away by a group of shadowy figures. Their screams echoed through the narrow streets, a haunting melody that would haunt Damien for years to come. The figures were clad in the garb of the city's elite, their faces obscured by hoods and cloaks. They laughed as they kicked and beat Damien's father, his mother's pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears. The rage that had been simmering within him boiled over, and he lunged at the group, his small fists flailing wildly. But the shadows had no time for a child's tantrum. They brushed him aside like a pesky insect and continued their grisly task. Through a blur of tears and anger, Damien watched as they brutally murdered his parents before his very eyes. The sight of their lifeless forms, lying in a pool of their own blood, was seared into his mind. Damien's life was forever changed by the horrific murder of his parents. The trauma of that night left him scarred both physically and emotionally. The city, already so oppressive, now felt like a prison. He was alone, adrift in a world that had no place for him. As he grew older, Damien became a target for the city's bullies. His haunted eyes and tattered clothes made him easy prey. They would taunt him, beat him, and steal whatever possessions he had. The constant abuse eroded his self-esteem and filled him with a growing sense of resentment. Despite the hardships he faced, Damien managed to find solace in the company of a young woman named Anya. She was kind and compassionate, and she saw beyond the hardened exterior he had developed. Anya became a beacon of light in the young man's otherwise bleak existence. Their love blossomed, offering Damien a glimmer of hope in a world filled with darkness. He dreamed of a future where he and Anya could escape the city and build a new life together. But their happiness was short-lived. One day, Anya was kidnapped by the same shadowy figures who had murdered Damien's parents. The city's elite had taken a cruel interest in her, and they were determined to make her their own. Damien searched desperately for her, but his efforts were in vain. The loss of Anya shattered Damien's remaining hope. He was consumed by a deep sense of despair and a burning desire for revenge. The city, which had once been his prison, now became his battlefield. He vowed to make those who had taken everything from him pay. With a newfound ruthlessness, Damien began to exact his revenge. He hunted down the city's elite, one by one, and delivered them the same fate they had inflicted on his parents. His reputation as a merciless killer spread throughout the city, and people lived in fear of his wrath. Damien's descent into darkness was complete. The boy who had once been haunted by loneliness and despair had become a monster, driven by a thirst for vengeance that could not be quenched. The city, which had witnessed his birth, would also witness his transformation into a villain. As the shadows grew longer, so did his list of enemies. The elite of the city whispered his name in fear, their hushed tones a grim reminder of the fate that awaited them. His power grew with each life he claimed, a dark force that twisted his soul and altered his very being. His eyes, once filled with the light of humanity, now gleamed with a cold, unyielding malice. One fateful night, as Damien stalked the streets in pursuit of his next victim, he was approached by a figure cloaked in shadows. The figure spoke in a voice that was both seductive and chilling, offering him a deal that would change the course of his life. "I can give you the power to avenge your loved ones," it said, "but it comes at a cost." Temptation gripped Damien's heart. The pain of his losses was still raw, and the promise of power was too great to resist. Without hesitation, he accepted the offer. The figure's hand touched his forehead, and a searing pain shot through his body. When the darkness lifted, he found himself changed. He could feel the power coursing through his veins, a strength and speed that surpassed any mortal man. His eyes had transformed, now piercing the night with a predatory gaze. His skin had turned a sickly pale, and his body was covered in intricate tattoos that pulsed with an eerie glow. The creature that stood before him in the mirror was no longer the Damien he knew. The city's corruption had shaped him into a weapon of vengeance, a creature of the night that brought fear and destruction to the very people he once dreamed of saving. His journey from a lost soul to a harbinger of doom was complete. But as he embraced his newfound power, he could not shake the gnawing doubt in the back of his mind. Had he become the very monster he sought to destroy? The whispers grew as Damien's reign of terror continued. The mysterious figure had bestowed upon him the ability to command the shadows, to become one with the darkness itself. His presence was a specter that haunted the night, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. Yet, with each life he claimed, the void inside him only grew larger. One evening, as he stalked the cobblestone streets, a sense of déjà vu washed over him. He found himself standing before the very alley where he had watched his parents murder. The memory was as vivid as if it had occurred mere moments ago, the pain and anger threatening to consume him once more. But this time, something was different. A flicker of light in the distance caught his eye, drawing him away from the shadows. It was a small, candlelit vigil held by the families of those he had slain. As he approached, the candles flickered and went out, one by one, leaving the mourners in a sea of darkness. Their fear was palpable, and it fed his power. But amidst the terror, he heard a voice that pierced through the veil of his anger. It was the voice of a child, trembling but firm, asking him why he had taken their loved ones away. The question echoed through the alley, resonating deep within Damien's soul. He realized that in his quest for justice, he had become the very thing he despised. The power he wielded had come at the cost of his humanity, and he was no longer the avenger he had set out to be. With a heavy heart, Damien made a decision that would alter the course of his life once more. He would seek redemption for his actions, no matter how futile it might seem. The path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but he knew that he could no longer be the creature of the night that brought only pain. He stepped into the light, revealing his monstrous form to the horrified onlookers. Their screams filled the air, but he did not flinch. Instead, he vowed to use his power to protect the innocent, to be the guardian the city so desperately needed. The whispers of fear slowly turned to murmurs of hope. Damien, the feared and the lost, had become something else entirely, a beacon in the eternal night, a symbol of the humanity that still dwelled within the heart of darkness. His story was no longer one of vengeance, but of redemption. The struggle between good and evil within him had reached a tipping point. As he walked away from the alley, leaving the candles behind, he knew that his battle was far from over. The shadows would always be a part of him, but he was determined to cast a new light over the city. Damien's newfound resolve led him to the city's underbelly, where the whispers of corruption were the loudest. He sought out those who had suffered at the hands of the elite, building an unlikely alliance with the very people he had once feared. They were the lost and the forgotten, and he became their champion. Together, they worked tirelessly to dismantle the city's corrupt systems, one corrupt official at a time. His monstrous form became a symbol of hope rather than fear, a stark reminder to those in power that justice could come from the most unexpected places. But with each victory, Damien felt the darkness within him stir. The power that had been granted to him was not easily controlled, and it demanded a price. The tattoos on his skin grew more intricate, the pulsing glow stronger, hinting at the struggle he faced to maintain his humanity. One night, as he stood atop the city's highest tower, looking down upon the sea of rooftops stretching into the horizon, he knew that he could not win this battle alone. The power within him was too great, too tempting. He needed guidance, a mentor who understood the precarious balance between light and dark. The figure in shadows appeared to him once more, but this time, its tone was not one of temptation, but of understanding. It revealed itself to be an ancient being, one who had witnessed countless cycles of corruption and redemption. It offered Damien a chance to learn the true nature of his power and the responsibilities that came with it. Hesitant but desperate, Damien agreed. The creature took him to a hidden sanctum, a place where the line between life and death was blurred. There, he began his training, pushing his body and mind to their limits. He learned to harness the darkness without letting it consume him, to be a force for good in a world that craved vengeance. The city watched as the creature of the night evolved into a guardian. His actions grew bolder, his intentions clearer. The elite who had once felt untouchable now lived in fear of the shadow that stalked them, the one who had been one of their own. But the path to redemption was not without its trials. Old enemies emerged from the shadows, seeking to claim the power that had been denied to them. Damien found himself fighting not just for his own soul, but for the future of the city he had sworn to protect. The battles grew fiercer, the stakes higher. Each confrontation tested his resolve, forcing him to confront the monster he had become and the man he once was. The darkness within him whispered sweet nothings of power and retribution, but he resisted, clinging to the flicker of light that was Anya's memory. Through the chaos, Damien discovered a strength he never knew he had, a strength born from love and loss. And as he stood against the tide of evil, he realized that his true power was not in the shadows, but in the hope that burned within his heart. The creature in the shadows, now revealed as a time-worn mentor named Moros, taught Damien the ancient art of shadow weaving. The sanctum was a place where the very fabric of reality seemed to unravel, revealing a tapestry of darkness and light. Moros spoke in riddles and parables, his lessons as much about the human heart as they were about the power of the shadows. Damien's training was intense, a dance of pain and discovery. He learned to manipulate the shadows, to make them bend to his will without succumbing to their seductive whispers. His body grew stronger, his reflexes sharper, and his mind clearer. But with each new skill came a deeper understanding of the cost of power. The very essence of his being was tied to the balance of light and dark, and any misstep could send him spiraling into oblivion. The candlelit vigils grew more frequent, and the whispers of hope grew louder. The people of the city spoke of a protector, a figure that emerged from the night to deliver them from the clutches of the elite. Damien's name was no longer a curse, but a beacon of hope in the everlasting night. One fateful evening, as he patrolled the city, he heard a scream that pierced the quietude. It was the same scream he had heard countless times in his nightmares, the scream of his mother. His heart raced, and the darkness within him surged, demanding he avenge her once more. But as he reached the source of the cry, he found not a reenactment of his past but a young girl, her eyes wide with terror, being dragged away by the very men he had once called his enemies. The sight of her innocence, a stark contrast to the corruption that surrounded him, brought a tear to his eye. He knew then that he could not fight alone. He had to save her, not just for her sake, but for the sake of the child he had once been. Damien's newfound resolve was tested as he faced the elite in a battle that would shake the city's foundations. The air was thick with the stench of fear and the metallic scent of blood. His heart pounded in his chest, not with anger but with a fierce determination to save her, to save them all. With each strike of his shadow-infused fists, he could feel the darkness within him straining against its leash. But he held firm, channeling his rage into a precise, calculated force. The men fell before him, writhing in fear as he approached. And then, as he pulled the girl to safety, the ground beneath them trembled. A monstrous creature, born of the city's despair and Damien's own anger, emerged from the shadows. It was a reflection of the monster he had been, a twisted mirror image of his soul's darkest depths. The creature roared, a sound that resonated through the very bones of the city. Damien knew that he had to face this manifestation of his rage. He stepped forward, his eyes meeting the creature's, and for a moment, he saw himself in its twisted visage. The battle was unlike any he had ever fought. It was a dance of light and darkness, a clash of wills. The creature was a part of him, and yet it was not. It was a test, a challenge from Moros to prove that he had truly learned the lessons of power and control. As the creature lunged, Damien weaved through the shadows, his movements a symphony of grace and lethality. He knew that to destroy the creature, he had to destroy the anger that had given it life. With a deep breath, he reached into the depths of his soul, searching for the light that had been buried beneath the layers of pain and anger. He found it in the memory of Anya's smile, in the warmth of her embrace. The light grew within him, and as it did, the creature's form began to falter. It howled in rage, a sound that was a twisted echo of his own despair. But Damien held firm. He drew upon the love and hope that had sustained him through his darkest hours, and with a final, desperate burst of energy, he thrust the creature back into the shadows from which it had come. The city watched in awe as the creature vanished, leaving only a trembling Damien in its place. The girl, now safe, stared at him with a mix of fear and wonder. He knew he had to explain, to show her that he was not the monster she thought he was. But the words caught in his throat, his humanity feeling as fragile as the candle flames that flickered in the distance. Damien took her hand gently and led her through the quietening streets, the darkness of his form dissipating into the shadows. He could feel the weight of his newfound power, a burden that both empowered and terrified him. The whispers of the shadows grew fainter, and the cries of the city's inhabitants grew more distant as he ventured into the night. Upon returning her to safety, the girl's family showered him with tears of gratitude. They offered him refuge, but he knew he could not stay. The shadows called to him, reminding him of his duty to protect the innocent. With a heavy heart, he turned away, the light from their candles casting long shadows as he disappeared into the night. The battles grew more frequent, and the stakes higher. Damien faced not only the city's elite, but also the creatures that dwelled in the abyss, drawn to the scent of his power. Yet with each victory, the light within him grew stronger. He was no longer a creature of vengeance, but a guardian of hope, a beacon in the eternal night. Moros watched from the shadows, his eyes gleaming with a mix of pride and concern. He knew the path Damien walked was fraught with danger, that the darkness within him could consume him at any moment. But he also knew that Damien had the strength to resist. For within the heart of every monster lies a spark of humanity, waiting to be rekindled. The city, once a bastion of despair, began to change. The candles of hope grew brighter, and the whispers of fear grew quieter. The people talked of the Shadow Guardian, the one who had risen from the ashes of their despair. Damien's name became a symbol of hope, a name whispered with reverence and gratitude. The elite grew desperate, their power waning in the face of this new threat. They plotted and schemed, seeking to destroy the very thing that threatened their rule. But Damien was ready. With Moros by his side, he prepared for the final battle, the one that would determine the city's fate. The night was cold and unforgiving as Damien and Moros approached the elite stronghold. The air was thick with tension, the very fabric of the city seeming to hold its breath. The shadows danced around them, eager to be wielded in the fight ahead. As they entered the fortress, the corrupt officials cowered in fear. They had underestimated the power of hope, the strength of a heart fueled by love and loss. Damien moved through the shadows, a silent specter of justice. One by one, they fell before him, their screams echoing through the halls. But amidst the chaos, he felt a tug at his soul, a reminder of the darkness that had once consumed him. It whispered sweet nothings of power, tempting him to embrace it fully, to become the monster they had made him. Yet, he resisted. With every step, he drew upon the light that burned within, the memories of Anya's love and the promise of redemption. The shadows grew restless, but they did not overtake him. He was the master of his fate, not a pawn in some cosmic game of power. Finally, he stood before the leader of the elite, a man whose face was a twisted mockery of humanity. His eyes were cold and dead, a reflection of the emptiness that had once consumed Damien. The room was bathed in the flickering light of candles, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. Their battle was fierce, a clash of wills that shook the very foundations of the city. The air was charged with energy, the line between light and dark blurring as they fought. Damien could feel the darkness within him stirring, eager to be unleashed. But he held firm, his eyes never leaving the cold, dead gaze of his enemy. As the leader of the elite lay defeated at his feet, Damien felt a strange sensation, a sudden emptiness. The room grew quiet, the candles flickering as if in mourning. The once powerful man was now a mere shell, his corruption and greed laid bare. The darkness that had fueled Damien's rage seemed to dissipate, leaving only a cold, hollow space where his anger had once been. Moros appeared beside him, his eyes reflecting the flame's glow. "You have done well, my pupil," he said solemnly. "But the fight is not over. The shadows will always seek to claim you. You must find a way to balance the light and dark within." Damien nodded, understanding the gravity of his mentor's words. He knew that the power he wielded was a double-edged sword, one that could both save and destroy. He looked around the room, at the faces of the elite, now broken and afraid. He knew that fear was not the answer, that true justice was found in restoring hope. The city slowly began to rebuild, the shadows of its past retreating into the corners. Damien became a figure of legend, the shadow guardian who had brought hope to the people. He continued to patrol the streets, his eyes piercing the darkness, seeking out those who would harm the innocent. Yet, the whispers of his own monstrous nature never fully disappeared. They haunted his dreams, a constant reminder of what he could become. But with each dawn, he woke with renewed purpose, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The love of Anya and the hope of a better future kept the darkness at bay. One day, as he watched the sun rise over the city's silhouette, he saw a vision of her, standing in the light. It was a brief glimpse, but it was enough to rekindle the warmth within him. He knew that redemption was not a destination but a journey, one that required vigilance and sacrifice. The whispers grew fainter, the candles of hope brighter, and the shadows less oppressive. The city had not forgotten its past, but it had found a way to move forward, its people united under the watchful eye of their guardian. Damien continued his patrols, his presence a comfort to those who once knew only fear. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider subscribing to stay updated with our latest stories, give us a like if you want to see more, and drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts.